literally ran out of the courtroom to give you this live update. Breaking news, Diddy has moved for a mistrial. He has moved for a mistrial. I'm gonna explain it to you. Come on in here. I want you to come in and let us know where you're viewing from. But here's the tea. So, the witness was the arson investigator, okay? It was the arson investigator, Mr. Jimenez. He's taking the stand and he's testifying as to the arson, what he knows, what he understands, blah, blah, blah. Well, the defense yesterday made a big old stink about certain things. Now, I'm going to tell you, the reason for the mistrial they're moving for is for prosecutorial misconduct. In other words, they are saying that what the prosecution has just done is so prejudicial to their case that there is no way for Diddy to get a fair trial going forward. That's right. The defense is alleging that what the prosecution just did is so prejudicial to his case that they have to stop the trial, that they must conclude the trial because what the prosecution just did is so prejudicial to his case that there's no way that this jury can give him a fair trial. Hit that like as you come in so that more people get a notification. Hit that subscribe too. So let me tell you what happened. So the detective is Detective Lance Jimenez. He's the arson investigator. So yesterday, before this testimony started, the defense filed a motion that they wanted to be able to basically talk about the DNA that was discovered on some of the collected evidence, the bottle, remember? So in prior testimony, when I believe it was Cudi was on the stand, Brian Still said, hey, were you informed that female DNA was found on the bottle? And he was like, no. And the prosecutor was like, objection, blah, blah, blah. There was a whole motion about it. And ultimately, what the defense wants to get into evidence is the fact that there was female DNA on the bottle. Now, the prosecution's position is if they want to get that in, that's one thing, but that this detective, Jimenez, wouldn't be the appropriate person to do it because he is not the one that did the DNA testing. He doesn't do DNA testing. That's not his thing. He's just an arson investigator. And other people did the testing, and then he used the results and made his report. So as an attorney, I'll tell you, the appropriate way is if the question is about DNA, then you do want to have the person that tested the DNA up here. Shout out to my girl, Janisha Forensic Rose. That's my homegirl who is literally a DNA tester. She testifies all around the country, especially in Philadelphia. She testifies around the world on DNA. So you don't get an arson investigator to testify about the DNA that was there, that wasn't there, blah, 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 because they simply don't know. Specifically, part of the issue here is there was partial female DNA. So the question becomes, was there other DNA? Is that the only DNA? How reliable is that DNA sample? Blah, 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 blah. This investigator can't speak to any of that because he doesn't know about that. His specialty, it's kind of like you can't ask a cop about a fire. You would want to go ask the firefighter, who did that aspect of the fire. Kind of like that is the concept. So the judge ruled that yes, in fact, the defense, when they cross-examine him, can ask him questions about the female DNA that was obtained on the bottle. Judge said that's fine. So in preparation for that, on direct, which is where the prosecution is asking him the questions, they asked him questions about fingerprints and what other evidence was collected. So they said, as far as evidence, there was the bottle. Y'all, it was an MD 4040. It was a Mad Dog 4040 bottle. So that's how I know it was probably one of Diddy's security guards that set that Molotov cocktail because they used Old English. That's what it was. They used Old English malt liquor bottle. That was an old security guard. So again, what I'm explaining, y'all, is live from the courthouse. I'm explaining how Diddy just filed for a mistrial, meaning that would terminate this trial. They would either have to retry him or start all over. But he filed for a mistrial because he is claiming that what the prosecution just did, and I'm going to go back to explain it, what the prosecution just did with the arson investigator on the stand was so prejudicial to his case that there is no way this jury can give him a fair trial. In other words, he's trying to get this case terminated, this trial terminated, and they're either going to have to start all over or they're going to have to drop the charges, either one. And here's why. Arson investigator is on the stand. And the prosecution is asking the arson investigator, all right, when you collected evidence, what was it? He says, MD, Old English malt liquor bottle was the Molotov bottle. He also got a lighter. And they said, what about fingerprints? He said, yeah, we collected 2 fingerprints. I said, okay. And then they were never able, and then she says, all right, and did you test the fingerprints? He's like, no. And then she was like, why didn't you test the fingerprints? He was like, well, they were destroyed. And she said, well, when was that? He says, August of 2012, they were destroyed. And she was like, well, is that normal? Is that unusual? And the defense goes, objection. And she said, okay, well, in your 15 years of experience as an arson investigator, has it ever happened? Because remember, the incident happened in January. This very, very important evidence was magically destroyed in August. So she wanted to say, in your 15 years of experience, has it ever happened that this has disappeared? So I'm over here as a lawyer. I'm like, ooh, girl, get him. Ooh, girl, get it. Because I'm like, we need some better arson evidence, y'all. We need some stronger arson evidence. Hit that like as you join. So I'm really thinking in my notes, I'm like, surely there's stronger arson evidence. She's asking this line of questioning, right? So the 2 questions she asked were, was it unusual to you that the fingerprints that you collected mysteriously disappeared before the investigation was closed? So it happened in January, they disappeared in August. And he didn't get to answer. They objected. The judge sustained the objection, which meant he wasn't allowed to answer. So then she says, okay, so she rephrases it. She says, in your 15 years of experience, has that ever happened before? And they say, object, and they have a sidebar. Well, they take the jury out. That is when it was very clear to me that, oh shoot, defense is probably gonna ask for a mistrial. The reason the defense gave is they are saying that basically the implication from the prosecutor was that the reason that the fingerprints came up missing is Diddy must have done something. He must have made it go away. And the prosecution is like, oh, no, that's not where we were going, Your Honor. We know that they're gonna try to tear up on cross-examination the credibility of this investigator. They're gonna try to say he didn't do a good job, it wasn't a good investigation, it was sloppy, blah, blah, blah. So in preparation, we wanted to basically take away the surprise to allow him to explain why fingerprints were not compared and that the reason was innocuous, which is that they weren't compared because they were destroyed. Thank you, Christy Collier, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Hit that like, y'all. Hit that subscribe as you come in. So the prosecutor's like, no, there's no bad inference. And the defense is basically like, BS. BS, Your Honor, because in jury selection alone, they said during jury selection, part of their challenge at selecting jurors is that jurors stated that some of them believed that because of how powerful and rich Diddy was, that he could pay to handle crime. Like, he could pay to make stuff go away. Literally, that was one of the things it said. There was a suggestion brought up that it was possible for Diddy, that it was possible for that Combs could buy his way out of this. Quote, buy his way out of this crime. So the defense is saying, y'all know we had this problem before day 1 of testimony. Before day 1 of testimony, selecting a jury, we had difficulty because jurors, before they even heard anything, were like, Diddy could buy his way out of it. So for the prosecutors to play into that stereotype that, oh, this evidence went missing and perhaps, they didn't say it, but perhaps it has something to do with Diddy and Diddy making it go away. They're saying that that is so prejudicial to the jurors that there needs a mistrial. There needs a mistrial. So here's what the judge, so they went to the side and they talked and they got to arguing back and forth. So, but here's the thing. The judge says, well, listen, you objected and I sustained both objections. In other words, questions were asked, they said objection, nobody got to answer. The 2 questions that were at issue that really just caused the hubbub was the first question was it unusual that these fingerprints came up missing in August and this happened in January? Was it unusual that this happened? And they said objection. Oh boy didn't get to answer, right? Detective didn't get to answer. So then she says, okay, Your Honor, I'll rephrase. She says, in your 15 years of experience, she didn't even get to finish the question, y'all. The defense says, Your Honor, objection, can we have a sidebar? In the end, what the judge said is, listen, the questions were never answered. The questions were raised, but they weren't answered. So the judge was like, so why can't I just instruct the jury to strike the testimony, ignore the testimony, and even go a step further with ensuring that that testimony won't be on the transcript, any transcript that would be provided to the jury. So that, because what happens is sometimes as lawyers on purpose, we will ask a question because we just want to put that in the mind of the juror, right? What it's called is you can't unring the bell. The defense said, hey, The defense was like, no, Your Honor, they cannot unring the bell. They said at this point, the jury is going to be left with surmising or wondering if Diddy himself made them fingerprints go away. Mind you, when I'm hearing all this, I'm like, oh, at first I was like, well, surely, because, you know, the arson evidence, like if you already don't like Diddy, the arson evidence is sufficient for you to be like, yeah, he did that. But if you're coming in neutral, I don't believe that that arson evidence would make all 12 of them find him guilty of arson beyond a reasonable doubt. So as I'm listening to this, though, my lawyer mind, I'm like, wait, she's going down the line of questioning, like implying, you know, he made the fingerprints go away. Honestly, that's what I thought first time hearing it. And I was like, surely she has some evidence of that, because here's how it works. If she's later going to call, let's say, one of the security guards to the stand to say, yep, Diddy paid me, I committed the arson on his behalf. If she's going to call that person, then the judge would have had no issue with her simply making the implication with this witness. But because the judge was like, the judge agreed it was improper, that means they don't have any concrete evidence. They're not going to have a security guard take the stand and say, oh yeah, I did the arson and I made the fingerprints go away. You see what I'm saying? If they had a witness that was going to testify that later, there would be no problem working with that or addressing and getting testimony about that now. Since they don't have that, that's why it arguably is considered prosecutorial misconduct, meaning the prosecution did something so bad, is what defense is saying right now. They did something so bad and created this impression in front of the jury that Diddy is out here making fingerprint samples go away, that he's that powerful, that there's no chance for Diddy to get a fair trial here. In the end, the judge ruled. Here's what the judge said, and this is important. The judge said no mistrial, but what we would do, what we're gonna do is he's gonna instruct the jury to dismiss and ignore, disregard both the question and the answer. So the question being, sorry, what's the question? The question being, is it unusual that in your experience, these fingerprints just disappeared? As well as the other question of, in your 15 years, has this ever happened before? Remember, the guy never got to answer it, but we know his answer is gonna be, yep, this never happened before, I can't believe it, right? So the judge says, we've got to dismiss the question. I'm going to instruct the jury to ignore the question and the answer. And then the defense was like, oh, Your Honor, because the judge then said, well, defense, what instruction do you want me to give? And the defense was like, and we want you to instruct the jury that the prosecutor's question was improper, and that's why they need to disregard it and strike it from the record. The prosecution was like, oh, wait, Your Honor, now, you're doing too much now. That's too far. Because Your Honor was like, okay. And then she was like, no. They were like, she said, Your Honor, it's going too far to say that the question was improper, because then that is going to prejudice the prosecutor. It's going to make people think that the prosecutor are behaving improperly. And they were right. Because remember, Diddy's theme is that this is a witch hunt from these prosecutors, that these prosecutors are out here trying to take down a powerful black man, that is a black man witch hunt. Okay? It's a black man witch hunt is what Diddy wants everyone to believe. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for the super chat, Bruce Davis. I appreciate you for that. Hit that like as y'all come in. So, literally the prosecutor was almost stuttering. She was very eloquent, but she was like, Your Honor, I implore you, please do not tell the jury that our question was improper. And so the judge thought about it and he was like, you know what? You're right. That might be going too far. So the judge said he's going to say, dismiss and ignore the question and the answer, although it wasn't the answer, and that the question was irrelevant. So instead of improper, saying irrelevant, saying that it is a ridiculous defense, Sweet Tea. I think that defense is kind of goofy. Hi, where can I send you some videos? Go to my Instagram. My Instagram is Attorney Simone Redwine. You can send me stuff there. It says, see, the judge switched it up. He is not messing with Diddy. I think this judge is really, really trying to be fair. And I honestly, I'm going to tell you this as a lawyer, when the prosecutor went down that line of questioning, my first thought about like, oh, why did the fingerprints disappear? I was like, yo, we about to get to some evidence about how they made fingerprints disappear. Ooh, we're getting some RICO, some juicy RICO. So then to find out she doesn't have that evidence, and now her reason that she gave was, well, I already knew they were going to try and tear up the credibility of this detective and the investigation by saying, why didn't you test fingerprints? Why didn't you do this on cross? And it is true that the strategy is, if it's something that's going to be damning like that, you don't want it to first come out on cross-examination. You want to present any weaknesses of your case on direct, so that when it is, because Brian Steele is going to tear that butt up, okay? When Brian Steele gets in that butt, it's less jarring. It's less of a, oh shoot. Otherwise, it looks like the prosecution was trying to hide bad facts. Y'all excuse me, my fingernail's going through it. You don't ever want it to look like you're hiding bad facts. Let me see what questions we got in the chat. How well do I feel the defense is? They're doing a good job. The defense is, they're very aggressive. They are. I mean, they don't miss an objection. They don't miss an objection. I told y'all yesterday, at the last question that the defense asked to Capricorn Clark is, he said, isn't it true that you told Cassie she needs to leave Diddy alone and go find another man? She was like, yes. And isn't it true that Cassie's response was, well, who should I date? Jay-Z's taken. Then he was like, no further questions. Like, literally, the prosecution didn't even have time to object, because it was kind of irrelevant. It was very irrelevant. It had nothing to do with what the testimony was about at that point, because this was recross. So I say that to say as one example of how that was an objection that the prosecution could have made, but didn't. But that defense, they are not missing their objections. They're getting a lot of important things struck. Today, allegedly, Mia is supposed to testify. Thank you guys so much. But here's what I am thinking. How much time do I think Diddy will ultimately get? I can't tell you yet. If the case ended today, who proved their case? Well, if you look at my reel that I also posted on RICO, here's what I think we've seen so far. And we're about to break for lunch, but what we've seen so far. So yesterday, Capricorn Clark's testimony helped to support. It was the drug distribution. She talked about getting drugs for Diddy and friends of his and other people. Drug distribution. She talked a little bit about tampering with witnesses. Kid Cudi as a witness, trying to get him to not file a police report or go to the cops. Cudi did go to the cops, but he never mentioned Diddy's name. She also talked about, of course, kidnapping and forced labor. Forced labor was /kidnapping was when he went and he got her and he made her do the lie detector literally for 5 days straight. But let me tell you about the significance of today's testimony. So this morning, so far, we had 2 investigators. We had a LAPD officer and we had the arson investigator. Now, I wrote down my notes for this arson. I said, for this arson, they need something more. I need there to be one of the security guards or one of his henchmen or one of them boys is gonna have to come to the stand and say, Diddy paid me to put that Molotov cocktail. Somebody, or that I overheard a conversation, or I saw my ex-boyfriend who worked for Diddy making the Molotov and I rode with him over there to drop it in there. I need something more for the arson. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, surely they have to have something more. The reason I say that is because Damian Williams, who initially brought the indictment against Diddy last year, he's no longer U.S. attorney, but he's really, really good at what he does. So I'm like, surely this is not the extent of the arson proof. But it could be. If it is, I don't think the arson is going to get there. But the other witness that came up this morning, here's the significance of him. This morning, the LAPD officer, and I was really like, I have been struggling with trying to understand why the prosecutor has been really focused on talking about the burglary / trespass, whatever you want to call it, to Kid Cudi's house. And yes, someone said, yeah, they can bring Roger Bonds. I think Roger Bonds would be an excellent witness because we already know what he's going to say. He was on Vlad doing an interview, and former security Roger Bonds, he got a lot of tea. He's got a lot of tea. So we'll see. But I'll say this. This morning, it made sense to me for the first time why the prosecution keeps talking about the burglary to Kid Cudi's house. So at first, I thought they were just setting up more circumstantial evidence for the arson. Because remember, December 11th, there was when Diddy found out that she was messing with Kid Cudi and went to his house. That's when allegedly he kidnapped Capricorn Clark at Pow Pow Point and forced her to Kid Cudi's house, but didn't do anything there, right? He rummaged through some Christmas presents and locked his dog in the bathroom, which, by no means is any good. I was like, well, first of all, I was like, why didn't they charge the burglary or trespass, whatever it is? And secondly, I'm like, what's the focus? I found out what the focus is today. Today, this morning on the stand, the LAPD officer gets on the stand, testified to how he investigated that burglary, but most importantly, he said that as he was arriving, he saw Diddy's SUV leaving and it was suspicious to him, so he wrote down the license plate. That proves Diddy was in fact there as Capricorn Clark said that he was that morning when she was allegedly kidnapped. So now I'm realizing the significance of the so-called burglary trespass is it helps support and prove up Capricorn Clark's version of the gunpoint kidnapping that she experienced that forced her to his house to commit that trespass. Y'all see me? So that was super smart of the lawyer, and that helps conclude and pull those pieces together. So then that just creates a question for the jurors. Okay, do you really think that the jurors are going to have to answer for themselves? Do you feel like Capricorn went over there at gunpoint, kidnapped, and was forced to go over there to Cudi's house at 5, 6 in the morning? Or do you think she did it voluntarily? Which one is it? Did she do it because she was scared and forced? Or did she do it voluntarily? And here's the thing. Voluntarily would include, if you're only doing this to keep your job, that's not kidnapping. That's not kidnapping. So I think the jurors, with regards to the kidnapping, if defense in closing words it and says, yeah, he did it. Because that's the thing. The defense isn't completely denying that Diddy went over there and did that. He's not totally, they're not doing that. They're just trying to say there wasn't a gun involved. They're trying to downplay it. I think what they're going to do is say, yeah, he did it, but he did it because he was jealous. It has nothing to do with RICO. It has everything to do with the toxic relationship that he was in, the cheating that he and Cassie, cheating. You can't cheat on somebody that has 5 other girlfriends, by the way, but the cheating between he and Cassie, and that, hey, it wasn't part of RICO. Also, hey guys, no one was hurt, nothing was stolen. They said it themselves, I think is what Diddy's team is going to go to. And they're going to say, and she came voluntarily as part of her job. She wanted the job. She loved Diddy. She worshiped Diddy. Even later, she told Diddy she had a crush on him. Would you tell somebody who kidnapped you that they had a crush on you? So now y'all see what I'm saying. Just breaking it down legally, these are the likely arguments that are going to be made on both sides regarding that kidnapping. So while it sounded real juicy in that indictment, I think in the actual facts, it is weaker. But today's testimony from the LAPD detective that confirmed that he took down Diddy's license plate, that Diddy was at that house at that morning, substantiates that Capricorn Clark, what Capricorn said, that she was there, that did happen, that Diddy was there, etc., with regards to the kidnapping. Now let me see your questions real quick before I have to go back in. Why can't the investigator testify to abnormalities that align with the kind of stuff that the crooked cops are doing? Isn't that proof of RICO? Oh, great question, AE. The reason you can't testify to something like the type of crooked stuff going on unless you have at least some evidence of something crooked occurring. So that's why I was saying before, like I was sure that they were at least going to get into testimony or imply later that there was a witness that could take the stand and be like, oh, I made the fingerprints go away. You can't imply something that there's no evidence of. The reason why is because it's too hard for a defendant to disprove something that never happened, right? You can counter evidence, you can do that, you can discredit evidence, but literally if there's no evidence to a claim that, you know, he made something disappear, if there's no evidence that's going to be presented, that means there's nothing for him to discredit. I hope that helps explain. How are they getting away with all of this? All of what stuff, honey? I'm not sure. Did they ask Capricorn yesterday if she touched the Molotov? No, they didn't. And trust me, she would have, if she had, they would have volunteered that. I think instead what the prosecution is going to try and imply is that it was a partial DNA, and that partial DNA can come from touch. It can come from multiple people touching. I would have liked them to say, like, for example, if in a DNA lab, one of the people in the lab is a woman, that's what I would have submitted. Now, they have not finished with this guy, so that could be what they're talking about right now. But y'all, I had to run out here and tell y'all this because I figured you would want to know all about this mistrial. Someone else said, I think he made Cassie do it. It could be. But also, part of why the prosecution didn't want the discussion of the DNA on the bottle to get in is it's only a partial sample and there wasn't a complete testing done. So in other words, it doesn't mean that was the only DNA there. That just means that was some of the DNA that was detected. I anticipate, though, that when the defense puts up their case, they're going to call a DNA expert that says, you know, nope, this was the only DNA found. It was a female's DNA. That, oh yeah, they could have tested, they could have done X, Y, or Z. There was enough DNA here to confirm or exclude people, and they didn't do it. And this was a sloppy investigation. That's what I anticipate when it's Diddy's turn. Because again, the female DNA, Brian Steele on cross tried to imply that perhaps it was another woman that Kid Cudi that was dealing with who could have done that because the night before, he was at like his girlfriend's sister's house or somebody, I don't know who she was, a girlfriend's sister's house, implying that maybe she found out he's in this love triangle with, you know, Cassie and him, and maybe there was a jilted lover who did it. Yeah, that's right. Shake your Astroglide, y'all. Oh, shake that Astroglide, y'all. I wasn't going to bring the Astroglide to the courthouse. They already take my cell phone and stuff like that. I was like, no, the Astroglide won't do well. Let me see what else you guys got here. Let me see the other questions. Now, possibly Mia is going to testify this afternoon. We're going to see. Hold on, I just dropped my pen. Let me grab it. Ooh. It says the prosecutors are cooking. It's not getting weaker. It says this is so crazy. Shake the lube. Yeah, y'all. If you're new here, first hit the like and hit the subscribe. I am covering the trial. I'm going to cover it, I think, for one more day. I gotta get back to work, y'all. I gotta get home. But I do have something for you guys when I get back. It says, do I think the trial is going in favor of Diddy? Well, here's what I think. When it's 8 weeks, so the answer is Diddy's team is doing a really great job. And what I do think, I wrote this down for you guys. Let me just go ahead and get into it. It says Diddy has 10 lawyers. He's trying to buy reasonable doubt. Here's what I did write down for you guys. What I wrote down that I was like, okay, we cannot forget this, is I said, it said, I had a really good point. I said, here it is. I said, I think the prosecution, y'all, this is my thought. Y'all tell me based on what you understand. I said, I think what the prosecution is having trouble with right now is a relatability issue. Here's what I mean. That jury is the most working class jury I have ever seen in my life. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing for Diddy. I'm talking, this looks like a jury of your peers. You got a deli worker, you got an older person in finance. The average age is 30s to 70s. I think those people are going to be a lot more inquisitive. They're going to ask more questions. They're going to critically think more. But because these are average Joes, what I'm saying is that I think the prosecution is having a relatability issue because so far the prosecution's version of this story is less relatable than Diddy's theme for its defense. For example, this version of kidnapping, y'all, I call it corporate kidnapping. It's corporate kidnapping. Okay, it's this girl's boss who is, a wild man in the music industry, is basically pulling her to the side and, takes her to, what is it, Central Park in the middle of the night. And there's another incident where his security ties her to a lie detector in an abandoned building for 5 days. They let her come home at night, but 5 days, and then she went back to work. And then there's the third gunpoint incident, kidnapping Cudi. That part. That's not the kind of kidnapping that average juror is expecting. When you tell them in opening arguments, they're going to hear evidence of kidnapping, right? That's why I'm calling it a corporate kidnapping. I also think, for example, the S trafficking. That's not a very relatable crime in this context. When people think of S trafficking, we think of like that 15-year-old girl, that 16-year-old girl that's like a hooker in your town, that somebody like forced her into being a hooker, and she can't, they won't let her go back, and they're pimping her. That's like what we think about. So here, I think what the prosecution has done is they've taken the law and they've taken the facts and they've found creative ways to make the facts fit certain things that are in fact violations of law. But at the end of the day, if the jury's not seeing it, if the jury can't relate to it, then the jury's not going to find him guilty. Specifically, I said, if a juror cannot see themselves in the witness, then they're not going to find the witness credible. They're not going to find them credible. And I think part of the challenge is in the witnesses that have come up before, so far, some of these witnesses that we're expecting to be slam dunks, what they're doing is they're not relatable from the perspective of they're not responding the way the average person would in that type of situation. Let me give you an example. So with the kidnapping, I don't know, I got what Capricorn Clark was talking about. I understood that, if you're in a niche job, which is like the music industry, and you're working for the top, if you quit that job or you get fired from that job, there's a stigma and you can't just get another job because that one person like Diddy is going to prevent you from working elsewhere. So I get that even after being kidnapped, you can't just quit. It's not as simple as that. But I think the average person may not find that relatable, may not find her relatable, because when they think of a kidnapping, they think, why are you coming back to work on Monday? Or they think, oh, there's no, I would never do that. I would never continue working. So I think when I say the relatability issue, what I mean is that I think that the prosecution needs to elicit more facts that are going to humanize some of these odd decisions from the witnesses. I'm going to say odd decisions, right? Because I think most people would say, yeah, if my boss kidnapped me on 3 separate occasions, 12 years later, I'm not still going to be asking him for a job. So then you got to make it relatable by show the desperation. Talk about more. I wanted to hear more about how she had a special needs son and how difficult it was for her to provide for this special needs son outside of the work that she was doing in the music industry. So it's weird. This case is weird. The facts are weird. It is not what I thought I was going to hear when I was going to hear a kidnapping. It is not what I thought I was going to hear of even when I heard S working, right? So you're going to have to find a way to make me see myself in these people's circumstances and their decisions. And if you can't, I'm going to just be like, this person was greedy, or this person just wanted to be in the industry, or blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm looking at the questions. I do want to answer them. Hit that like, guys, and please share this on Facebook or wherever. I literally hopped out of the courtroom. I am live at the Diddy trial because I had to tell you about the mistrial. And the gist of the mistrial, Diddy's team moved for a mistrial based on prosecutorial misconduct, meaning that the prosecutors did something so bad that they feel like the jury is now tainted and they cannot get a fair trial. That's what they moved for. The judge denied it, but the judge said he was going to instruct the jury to dismiss the alleged improper questions that the prosecutor asked, which were basically the prosecutor was asking the arson expert who testified that the evidence disappeared. Literally, he testified the evidence disappeared. The implication was that it disappeared because Diddy made it disappear. And the defense was like, now the jury is going to think Diddy's out here doing stuff. No, I think he does stuff like that. But the issue is there was no proof of it. You can say that, you can allude to that if later you're going to call somebody to the stand to say, yeah, Diddy made me commit that arson. Diddy paid me to do that arson. But they don't have that proof. They're not going to have, it sounds like they are not going to have someone come to the stand, one of those security guards or whatever, and say, yeah, I'm the one that made the Molotov cocktail. Or they might have somebody say that, but they're not going to have someone say, oh, I made the fingerprints go away. Y'all, I'm going to tell you the truth. Here's how I really think the fingerprints went away. Yesterday, Capricorn Clark testified that in the summer of 2012, which is when the fingerprints went away, she was called by an arson investigator who asked her, was given her number by Kid Cudi, or whatever. Kid Cudi said, she may know something about it. They called her and said, I want to talk to you about the arson that happened at Kid Cudi's house. She hung up in that person's face. Well, that was the same time, right around the same time that these fingerprints were destroyed. They didn't come up missing. Let me clarify. They were destroyed. Well, it's an even more likely chance that once the last witness that they could think of to call and get more information on the arson hung up in their face, they were like, this investigation is closed, and likely destroyed evidence. Now, you're not supposed to, even if you close a case, you're still supposed to maintain the evidence for a number of years, decades. It depends on the county. But I do think it's a lot more likely, since there's no proof that Diddy did it, it's more likely that they were destroyed once there was no additional proof to help support an arson. I hope that makes sense to y'all. It says, if the female did it on behalf of Diddy, he didn't want it to point back to him. Yes, so we're talking about the female DNA that was found on the bottle. That could totally happen. See, the thing is, the reason it's RICO, Diddy doesn't do this stuff himself. In fact, in the text message, in the message from Cassie to her mama, she said, Diddy said he's gonna hurt me, that he'll be out of the country when he does it, so that it will not tie to him, it will not connect to him. The whole thing about RICO is they would never have his prints. He would never be on it because he's not going to do it. He'll order things done. It says, why aren't they pursuing questioning of Kim's angle? So they might do that later. They don't have enough. They don't have enough to connect him to that. And you don't want to look like, literally, they don't want to go into Kim in this trial because you don't want to look like you're throwing everything at the wall to just try and get a conviction. You want to make it look like this man is running amok on, people of New York or wherever else. He's running amok on America. He's fixing things. He's making evidence go away. He's tampering with witnesses. He is a terror, and that we need to get him for the things that he's done and not simply for, things that he's been rumored to have done. Aren't they pursuing more questioning of Kim's? Okay, not yet. What's the jury's mood? Sometimes they're sleepy. I can't see them today. Yesterday I was in the courtroom. Thank you. Steele is doing a great job. Brian Steele on the defense is doing a great job. Ooh, thank you. I got another super chat. Hey, Simone, hope you'll get a chance to go to Melva's. Oh, I love Melva's. I am sure going to try while you're there in New York. I would love to try them. Yep. Let's see what else we got. Thank you. Ooh, let me see what else we got. All right. It is saying, gosh, y'all. So this is a summary, not just of the mistrial issue, but the morning testimony that we've had so far in the Diddy trial today. So it was the testimony was from an LAPD officer who stated that when he pulled up to Kid Cudi's house that morning, the morning of the burglary, that he saw Diddy's truck leaving and wrote down his license plate. So that corroborates Capricorn Clark's version of Diddy being there and going in the house. And it helps to support the kidnapping. Now, the question is, did she go voluntarily or involuntarily? That's going to be up to the jury, including the fact that she had her cell phone on her the whole time. She called two people. She called Lauren London first, her bestie, and then she called Cassie and was like, hey, don't come over here, or Diddy's over here with a pow trying to unalive Cudi. Sorry, it's New York City, y'all. But all of this plays into, as well, the RICO. So I do want to be clear on that. Even with Capricorn Clark's testimony yesterday, part of it is that she talked about the mode and means that this organization operates. And many have been saying, yeah, but he's doing these things for personal reasons. Diddy is doing these things not to pursue his enterprise. Here's the thing. To have RICO, it just needs to be a common purpose or goal. A gang is part of RICO. And a gang isn't necessarily doing everything they do for money. So it doesn't have to be for money. It could be a common purpose or goal. And multiple staff members have testified. Their goal is to satisfy Diddy's wants and wishes and to keep him happy. as well as to build his brand. And we all know that if any of this stuff, like if the Kid Cudi thing got out, like how Diddy told Cassie and Capricorn Clark that y'all better make sure Kid Cudi doesn't tell the police that it was me. Otherwise, all three of y'all are coming up unalived, is what he said. And so, sure enough, the investigator said, no one ever mentioned Diddy. There was literally no reference of Diddy with either the arson or the burglary, even though Kid Cudi pulled up and he was there. So this goes to the fact that what he does is he uses his staff to tamper with witnesses, to execute the crimes. He's not the person out there blowing stuff up. He's not the person out there, getting his own substances. That's why it's RICO, is because they needed a law to get to a mob boss who's ordering other people to do his dirty work. But it says it's just a DV case. If it's just a DV case, Diddy would not harm other people other than his girlfriend, but that's not the case here. I think they're gonna try to argue that the burglary was him being jealous, him being envious, his girl was cheating on him, and that's what that was related to, the burglary, that it was not part of the criminal enterprise. But the problem is when you keep using your staff to execute crimes, that creates the RICO. You're literally taking your workers and telling them, do this thing that's illegal. Now, and these things are not just for DV. Those are things that also cover up stuff to protect his brand, his image, his rep. So I think the prosecution case is relatable, and I hope the jury can see it. Do I think Diddy will testify? I don't know. They're doing really good. He's got a lot of ego, so he might want to. He might really want to. Capricorn mentioned working 80,000. Yes, does she have a lawsuit based on employment law? So what Capricorn Clark talked about is like, she had no parents. She had no one she could go to. She was like 28 years old in this role with all this power, but she was so underpaid. At her height, she made like 90K is what she referenced. And she went to HR, told HR, the accountant for Diddy did a calculation, and for 3 months, just 3 months alone, she was owed $80,000 for overtime. Here's the thing. She hired a lawyer in 2012 for wrongful termination to pursue that. So someone asked, can she file a lawsuit based on employment law to get that $80,000? Here's the thing, no, because she already did. She didn't file a lawsuit. She did the step before that, which was hired a lawyer, made a demand, and negotiated a settlement. She did that after the gunpoint issue. She tells Harvey Pierre and referenced HR. In turn, they fired her. That is absolute wrongful termination. So she hires the lawyer. That lawyer then negotiated both the settlement, and this is what I do for all my clients that call me for a consult at SimoneRedwine.com, Simone with a Y. For all my clients that call for a consult, I say, look, whenever you have an employment law issue, as you're getting ready to leave, you want to draft up a referral reference letter. That is going to be your standard letter. Don't date it, draft it. And as part of your settlement package, you're going to have him executed. That was part of her settlement. You know what else was part of it? It was money. Here's why I say Diddy's legal team is on it and they're on top of their objections. That legal team refused to allow us to find out how much she settled for. Every time the prosecution tried to elicit that testimony, object, they would object. I don't know if it was relevancy grounds. I couldn't hear the grounds, but they sidebarred about it. Well, I thought it was directly relevant and that the prosecution should have fought harder to get it in. The reason it is relevant is because the defense opened the door. The defense kept saying, oh, you kept coming back to him because you loved working for him. And that was even after the settlement. As a prosecution, I would have said, listen, she kept coming back to him because she needed a goddamn job, because she made a reasonable settlement with him. She wasn't trying to take him to the cleaners, but it was a minute amount, and it was for the past work she'd already did. So imagine if she got 80K for 3 months and had been working for him for years, how much that amount would have been. But it wasn't $1 million, it was far under. Well, the reason Diddy's legal team did not want the dollar amount of that settlement to be submitted to the jury is, number one, it wasn't gonna be a large amount. It would substantiate and explain why she needed to come back to work, as well as it would substantiate how, like, whatever amount he gave her was not enough to make her whole. It wasn't enough for her to be able to sit back and not have to work. Again, she has a son that suffers from autism. So I thought that was very clever of them to be able to get that out. Because remember with Cassie, they wanted into evidence every dime that Cassie got paid from different entities. They specifically asked, they said, Cassie, how much did you settle with Diddy for? 20 million. Then said, you got money from the hotel, didn't you? How much was that? 10 million. No objection there. They wanted it in because they were going to use that high number to make it seem like she was money hungry, etc. But when it's a low number, they don't want you to know it's a low number. Does that make sense? I hope you're following. She's swaying the people. This is not a, what? Good reporter. Oh, hi, the awesome. Thank you for joining me. I'm not a reporter. I'm a lawyer. So it's not that I'm not swaying. I give my legal opinion based on what I saw in the courtroom as an attorney. So what I also tell you is, like, as an attorney, these were the issues. This was the argument. I explained earlier why the defense moved for a mistrial. The judge seriously considered it, why he didn't grant it, but why he did make other accommodations. And so I'm not seeking to sway you. I'm telling you weaknesses on both sides. Thank you for joining us. Do I think that Fat Joe French or any DJ Khaled, like any of those people, if they're going to testify, they're going to do it on the defense side when they are called for the defense. They're not going to do it on the prosecution side. I don't think they're going to have anything helpful for her side. Or even if they do, they would only do it under a subpoena because they don't. Anybody who still wants to work with Diddy, watch this. Y'all notice this? Any witness that still wants to be on Diddy's good side or work with Diddy or be able to refer to him on their resume or elsewhere has not been coming up here voluntarily. They've been coming pursuant to a subpoena, like the one boy, I think it was David James or whatever his name is, David James, as well as, Lord have mercy, as well as, hopefully that doesn't mess up my copyright, but David James, as well as the other white guy, George Kaplan. George Kaplan, like literally, he had to sign in, he signed an immunity agreement on the stand because he was not about to piss off Diddy.
Out of curiosity, what's your platform called?
This is a YouTube. My channel is called Girl, Is That Legal? Hi,
Yeah.
nice to meet you.
All right.
I'm a lawyer.
I'm Big Act.
Nice to meet you.
Was
I know
inside?
you. Upstairs, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of breaking it down
Right.
for the girl.
This is not live.
Mine is live right now.
Oh, okay.
But I'll speak to you in a second. It's
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
No problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like wrapping it up. It was a lot.
Okay.
Did you hear about the mistrial?
That's why I need you.
Okay, I'll come over there in just a second.
Right here.
Okay, right. So, all right, guys. So this is what I've got for now. Thank you guys for joining. Share this, share this, share this. Hit that subscribe, y'all. We are almost there. I'm trying to get to 55,000 subscribers. You can get me there. Don't forget, you can also go to my Instagram. Oh, you guys, I'm also going to do a promotion. Y'all, I don't have time to pull clips. Let me promise you this. If you pull a clip and you send it to me on YouTube that I reuse on any of my platforms, I will give you a free 30-minute consultation or a free background check of your choice. Because, y'all, I am out of time. So you hear me again. And that's of any interesting thing, any funny thing, of any of the takes that I've done for this Diddy trial. If you want to go ahead, clip it. I'll give you a free 30-minute consultation or a free 30-minute background check on the person of your choice. Just DM me on Instagram, which is at Attorney Simone Redwine on Instagram, SYMONE. We'll do it there. Thank you guys so much. I'll chat with y'all later. Bye. All right. Oh, check me out. I'm about to be on, I think it's DJ Academic's platform. If he's live, I'm about to go join them live. So go over to Academics. Bye, y'all. How do I turn this off? There we go.